Welcome to the inaugural, that means first for the MMA fans, edition of the MMACurmudgeons podcast. I'm Jonathan Snowden from the mighty BleacherReport.com. To save you the trouble, BleacherReport.com has not been a website specializing in slideshows for about 3 years, so save that critique. What we do specialize in is excellence. That's where I'm from. Joining me is Ryan Loco, the world's best cage side photographer named Ryan.
I'm not from Bleacher Report. I just want to make that. And also, Bleacher Report has nothing to do with this. They are probably trying to push themselves as far away from this as possible. I'm from my computer room right now. I'm sitting in I will brag, though. I'm sitting in a chair that probably costs more than most people's cars. But that's all I'm going to say.
How cheap do you imagine most people's cars are?
Really, really cheap. So this is the MMACurmudgeons podcast. It's not a podcast. Sorry, it's a YouTube cast because we're dumb. We don't know how to do anything, and all we know how to do is upload stuff to YouTube. So that's where this is going. It's going to YouTube.
It's probably obvious, as of right this moment, that neither of us really knows how to do this. We don't know what to say. We don't know where to put our hands. This is new. We're figuring this thing out.
Yeah, so basically what happened is we do a podcast already, a legit one, like a real one. We have a producer. It's called the Two-Way Dance Podcast. It's on patreon.com/two-way-dance-pod. Two-Way Dance Pod or just Two-Way Dance? Doesn't matter. Google it. You'll figure it out. It's on our Twitters. Anyway, Jonathan and I then started realizing that we complain to each other all day in DMs on Twitter. So why not make this thing? But we don't have the budget. We don't have any money. We can't beg TJ DeSantis to help us out with this one. So instead, we're going ghetto, and we're just going to do this, put it on YouTube. What we can promise you is there's really no set schedule. And we can also promise you that we're not going to start out with 15 minutes of ads like you hear on every other podcast, where it's like a pillow, or it's untuckit.com, or it's something else. That I can promise you, because no one's
we are recommending no audiobooks, no kinds of men's grooming products, none of that. What we offer is like a slightly different perspective on the mixed martial arts, because both of us have been around this sport for probably like a decade plus now. I mean, that's why we're the curmudgeons, right? We're getting older, and we're not beholden to kind of like the structure, the corporate structure of MMA and its media empires. And so we have a little bit of freedom, I guess, to say what we think. And that's kind of our intent here.
Yeah, basically, I don't have a real job, and everyone hates John already. So what could the harm be?
So here we are. And as you do, apparently, in the podcasting world, the video cast, the YouTube cast, it seems like people talk about like what's just happened in the world of mixed martial arts. And it turns out there was a UFC event that, Ryan, you went to, and it was that's your first time, if I recall, like back on the scene in what, like 3-4 years? I don't know. How long is this your first time at the UFC in a long time, right?
It's it's my first time shooting cage side for UFC in probably 5 years. The last one I shot was either one in Florida or one in Minneapolis. I can't remember which one happened. So yeah, it was kind of odd. I've shot like the UFC at T-Mobile before, but I wasn't cage side for UFC 200. So it was kind of an odd feeling to be back. I was luckily right in front of a pole. So that's when you get the best photos, is when you have a pole in front of you. But so like what always happens is people ask me like, hey, you went to the fights. What did you think of this one? And to be honest with you, I don't remember anything from any fights. Like I really don't. Like that's like you're in such a weird zone, and like I'm manually focusing the whole time. So it's like my brain is like focusing on something else. Like so these fights occur, and you don't really know what's happening as they happen. So like I'd go online and I saw like people saying this and this, and I have to like piece it back together to try to remember like, oh yeah, that was that fight and that was that person, because all I'm really worrying about is just keeping the fighters in focus, But so I guess the big story out of UFC 209 was no one's really happy with the main event.
No, definitely nobody was pleased with the 5 rounds of action between Tyron Woodley and and Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, who are both lovely individuals. That's like what kind of gets hard about covering the MMA scene is like, eventually you've had the opportunity to meet and kind of interact a little bit with a lot of the fighters, and it kind of makes it hard to sit here and say like these two lovely gentlemen put on a fight that was mind-numbingly boring. But that is unfortunately what happened. Even as you're trying to focus your camera, surely you recognize that there was nothing to focus on.
Well, I mean, you watched the fight, or at least what I saw from the fight. It looked like one game plan, and that was Woodley was going to back up to the cage to try to lure Steven to do something. But Steven, and I think he even said at the post-fight press conference, was like, I know he's waiting for me to strike, so I'm not going to strike. So really you have these two guys kind of stuck in a stalemate because they don't want to give either one the advantage because they know what happens when someone gets the advantage. I get people being upset, but really it's your fault, all you people.
You're blaming the fans.
MMA fans are so fickle that they want you to go crazy and put on a wild fight. But then when you lose because you did something stupid to put on a wild fight, you're the worst fighter in the world. So now you have a guy in Tyron Woodley who is the champ. A lot of things come along with being the champ. You have the belt. There's better sponsorship opportunities. There's better endorsement deals whatsoever. And basically you want him to risk all of that so that there could be some excitement, and then you could tell him how awful he is if he loses. It's all this is your fault. Like really, this is like when I cover kickboxing and I work with kickboxers, like after a fight, everyone's like, man, that was a great fight. Like, who cares who won and lost? That was a wonderful fight. That was a really great job. Like, wow, we were really excited. MMA is so fickle, and fans are so awful that this is what happens. And I don't blame either one of them. Like, they're fighting for a title, okay? They're fighting for the championship. They're fighting to be recognized as the best welterweight in the world. And you want them to do stupid stuff to amuse you so you can clap like idiots in your chairs. Sorry. I mean, I get it.
I'm starting to feel a little offended because that is exactly what I want.
I know you do. And
I want them to perform for me.
At the same time, I gave them
$60. I'm saying I gave $60 to somebody, to a rich guy in California maybe, or Ari from Entourage. Somebody got $60, and I want to be amused.
I get it, and trust me. The thing is, like, I'm calling MMA fans awful, but I expect them to be awful, and it's okay for them to be awful because that's what this sport is. You want to see excitement, but I'm just seeing it from the other side because I hang out with these guys all the time. I see what they go through, and the fans want them to risk everything for something, to make a mistake, and it's just not going to happen. And I think Tyron even said it at the press conference, like, yo, I'm the one in there. I'm the one that has to worry about it, and I'm still the champ, so deal with it. I think that what you saw was two conflicting styles that worked really well to negate each other, or two fighters that negated each other, both in their own heads, and that's what we got. I mean, at the end of the day, if Khabib's not off this card, are we complaining as much? Like I think like we got so let down by what happened to Khabib that we kind of took it out on Tyron and Steven. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so because like up until the main event, like I'm a curmudgeon. I have seen so many MMA fights, literally thousands. Every fight for every major promotion ever, pretty much, and so like it's easy for me to get bored. And like be like, I've seen this all before, but yet like this was a pretty entertaining card until that moment. There was like Overeem being like the world's scariest man, kneeing Mark Hunt in the face. Some lady I never heard of choked out another lady I'd never heard of. That was pretty exciting. Lando from Jackson Winklejohn fought some guy from The Ultimate Fighter. You'll notice these are not big names, but there were things happening, and I was entertained. There was never a moment where I was just like, man, I want to turn this off and put on Masterpiece Theater. Like I was into it until the main event, but the main event is the main event for a reason, and it can really take something that's been a B and turn it into a D, just like in the snap of your fingers. Like it carries that much weight.
Yeah, no, I get it. Don't get me wrong, I understand, and I'm not going to sit here and say it was the most exciting fight I'd ever seen. But like at the same time, like you see those people and like there's a really boring fight on, like really boring for me. Like I'll watch, and then I'll see on Twitter someone write how like, oh, this is a beautiful like you could see the chess work, like you know what I mean. So like I feel like people pick and choose when they want to be impressed. Like, yes, this wasn't like an insane grappling match, but at the same time, it was basically like a little chess match of two guys in stand up, not really wanting to give an inch to either guy because they knew if they gave an inch, the fight could be over, which is what we saw in the fifth round. Now, for me, I was more surprised that Tyron didn't do that earlier because I didn't really see how Stephen was going to be any problem for Tyron when he comes forward like that, especially with him going back against the cage to kind of lure Stephen in to get his forward momentum going. But then again, I'm not a coach. I just sit here. It's just what I saw.
So anybody can sit here and jibber jabber about the fights on the card, but almost nobody can put us in the experience of being literally cage side. Like even as a writer, I'm always like removed a couple of rows from the cage. You're literally as close as you can get. What is that experience like? Like as you're sitting there snapping pictures, I imagine there's a lot going on. Like the TV crew is doing its work. There's UFC people and commission people scurrying around. Every photographer is changing lenses like 1,000 times. Like what's the experience like as you kind of are working for hours at a time trying to capture that perfect image?
Well, I mean, first off, your elbows. I was an idiot. I should have brought something to cushion my elbows because they got completely destroyed by the cage floor. But it's a really unique feeling, especially in the main event, because there's just a different feeling. There's a different vibe in the arena, especially when the lights come down, and the lights are just focusing on the ring. Um, and you realize how long 5 minutes is. Like 5 minutes is an eternity. It's awful. Like I'm getting tired. Like I'm looking at the clock because I'm like, oh, in a minute 30, I can put this camera down for a minute, and rest for a second because it really is draining, especially after shooting 11 fights. But you realize like there's someone in there against Tyron Woodley and Stephen Thompson going, I have 90 more seconds of this. Like it's awful, and you realize how hard these guys hit, how quick everything happens. It's quite an experience to be that close. I dig it. It's a lot of fun. Like when I shoot for World Series of Fighting, I'm actually over the cage, so it's even closer. Especially when like they fight like right underneath me, and you realize like this is a horribly brutal sport, and I'm so glad I don't do it.
So, there are photographers. I'm thinking like of like Esther Lynn from MMA Fighting and All Elbows, who are consistently capturing great photographs from the fight. And what's the secret, do you think, for the fact that she's so often able to really capture the intensity and the feeling and just the perfect image? How does that happen? How does that come together?
So I think that what happens is a lot of times is that a lot of people are taking photos and they're trying to capture what is happening, which is fine and what you're supposed to do. And you're doing it very like, for a newspaper. And this is what occurred. Fighter on the left in blue punched fighter on right in red. And that gets the job done. But really in photography, and I promise I'll start bitching about something here in a second, but really about photography, it's about seeing something that's about to happen before it happens. And you kind of have to have an instinct, and that goes along with either doing it for a long time or being involved in the sport for a long time. And you sort of get the idea of the moment. So, like, you get the idea of Elkins coming back, winning that fight, and he's going to be excited. So you kind of sort of plan that in your head the split second before it occurs. Like, he's probably going to jump up, or he's probably going to run to this side. And is there a way for me to capture both him being excited as well as the fighter being on the ground? So really, it's something you kind of have to see before it happens. and it's something that I don't know if you can necessarily be taught. You just kind of have to have it, or you kind of have to grow with it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and one thing I noticed that you do, and I'm being very complimentary here. We're not being curmudgeonly at all,
Yeah, this
but
is what is when did this turn into the Ryan Loco interview?
false advertising. But I'm curious because how often you get to talk to somebody that does something truly unique for a living,
You
and
literally talk to
so
me every day.
it's true. But maybe the 10 people who are listening are like just so interested in the life of a UFC photographer. So you've been like around the business for so long, and like a lot of MMA writers, you see them like on Twitter and stuff, they're like me and this fighter are good friends, and like in real life they've talked to that fighter like a couple of times, and maybe they've hung out with them one time after an event or something, and they identify themselves as a friend to that fighter. Fighter probably doesn't remember who they are. That's the typical MMA media relationship with an athlete. But you actually worked for the Black Zillions for years, and so like when Rashad Evans is walking into the cage last weekend, like that's legit like somebody you've spent a lot of time with, right?
Yeah, it's very odd. It's not like a good feeling, especially as you're watching it and you're like kind of going like, oh, this is not really going the way I planned. I don't think no if Rashad's going to get this the judge's decision, and it's an awful feeling. And really like taking photos of your friends being punched, being hurt, and having to like select them because that's what you do. It's an awful feeling. It's not fun. And like so like when I shoot World Series of Fighting too, like I get into the cage after the fight and these are people that I have shot multiple times. Like we have the studio day and they come in and I'm friends and I know their families and I see their wives and their kids that comes in and then I have to get in their face as they're being checked by a doctor bleeding and take photos. And it's just, it's awful because I'm doing my job, but this is still someone in a very vulnerable moment. And like I have to explain, like, no, I have to get this shot. I'm sorry. And most of them do understand. It's just, it's not cool. Like I remember it happened with Tyrone Spong when he fought in Glory and we were there in Istanbul and he broke his leg against Saki. And like I was shooting him being taken into an ambulance because I had to, and it's my friend, and he just had his leg shattered. It's terrible.
It does become harder like the better you know somebody, and like intellectually like Rashad is going in there and he understands the stakes and he understands what could happen and he understands he's going to get punched, and he's been doing it long enough that he understands that like this is a binary sport in which like you win or you lose, like there is no ambiguity to it, and he knows that he could lose, and yet that in your head, but like in your heart when you like, even for me, like I've twice been able to shadow him on fight weeks, and like so then you like your feelings get involved in it, and like that's for me sitting at home having met the guy a few times, like do you ever like find yourself like unable to like concentrate, like you're maybe not shooting his fight as well, or at this point can you just kind of like put all that aside?
No, I get like for me, like I'm a fuck up. I'm a goofball. I'm stupid. I fully admit that. And there's only one thing on this planet that I love to do. There's only two things I love: my wife and my dog. There's only one thing I love to do, and that's take photos. That's it. It's like it's why I'm here. It's why for some reason I didn't die years ago. It's why I haven't been hit by a car yet. It's why I'm put here. And when I'm taking photos, it's the only time where like everything makes sense. And so, as awful as it sounds, I feel like no matter what occurs, and if it's the worst thing in the world, if I have a camera in my hand, I'm okay. And everything makes sense, and it's almost like my shield, right? So, like, I feel like no matter who is in front of me and what is occurring, if I have a camera and my job is to take photos of it, I can do it. And, like, so, it's a little weird story. I was shooting bull riding for T-Mobile Arena, and it's my first time shooting bull riding, and you're right on the field, like literally next to the bull, and they give you this, you're at this wall, and it's got a big opening, so you stick your camera through. and this bull comes and literally it's right in my face, and his leg goes right next to my face, and I almost got smashed in the head by its hoof, and I probably would have broken like my nose or would have smashed out teeth. And I look back, and every other photographer had moved back 4 feet. But I'm the idiot that thinks because I'm there with a camera, I can. I'm the idiot that would be overseas documenting war, and I would be shot because I would feel like I'm safe and protected, and this is what I'm supposed to do. No one can hurt me. Nothing can hurt me. I'm taking a photo.
That's right. The bull couldn't see you because you had that camera there. You were invisible to it.
Basically.
I've had like a similar experience when I was when I was in the army. We were stationed in Frankfurt, Germany, and we used to go to the Frankfurt Galaxy games, and you'd get to be on the field, like literally on the field, and so that's when you realize like how fast football players are and how violent the game is. But I remember standing on the sideline, and like the first time you're there, like as someone is running out of bounds, like with the ball towards you, you don't really realize they're coming. And like, I was within inches of being run over by a 240-pound tight end because, I didn't have the instinct yet to move out of the way. And I think that's like kind of the same thing that was happening to you with the bull. Like, until you see it, like you don't know. You're not born with the appropriate instincts to move out of the way. You have to learn it. And so I guess we're lucky to still have you with us.
So here's my question. Speaking of dodging 240-pound men, and so we can get off me and being a photographer. What about you and Stipe? Sorry.
Stipe. Okay, so while you were having this like profound moment where you were like within inches of men like exerting their will on other men and like these great athletic moments and these valiant athletes in there like pouring their heart out, like I'm sitting here like beefing with people on the internet, which like seems to happen to me like it's beyond my control at this point. Like, I'm not intending to like have a beef with UFC heavyweight champion Stipe Miocic. But so what happened was I made a tweet after Overeem knocked out Mark Hunt. And I was like, holy fuck, because I'm a classy guy. Holy fuck, Overeem is the scariest man on the planet. Because, Mark Hunt is indestructible, and yet he got kneed in the head and just like dropped like a sack of potatoes to the mat. And that was frightening to me. And this tweet did not mention Stipe. I was not thinking of Stipe in the moment. I was thinking of this like incredible thing that I just saw. But Stipe apparently follows me on Twitter and was not pleased with the idea that I thought that someone other than him was the scariest person on the planet. And so he responds with like
but here's my thing, and I don't know Stipe. We chat on Twitter back and forth, and we're friendly. Like, okay, like Cabbage Carrera is freaky scary, right? Like you could hit him with a baseball bat, right?
Right.
And he would be fine. That doesn't mean that he is a better fighter than Stipe. He's just terrifying.
Right. So I tried to explain this.
Jeff Monson is terrifying.
Yes.
Stipe would beat him, but Jeff Monson's terrifying. Like Jeff Monson would probably like have you murdered in Russia. Like they would poison your drink and you wouldn't even know it.
So of course a lot of people are tweeting me like, "Oh, what about Stipe?" And like, and I'm trying to explain like the conceptually what I'm going for here when I say scary, because like GSP was the best welterweight in the world, but GSP is not scary. He's just really good at UFC fighting.
Correct.
Otherwise, he's like a gentleman. And so like, Stipe is very good at MMA fighting, but like Stipe is also a guy who does admirable work as a firefighter in the community, right? He gets up and goes to work every day. He probably has a dog. He probably enjoys children. Like he's a good fella. I don't find that particularly scary. That's not what I mean when I say that. Like Gilbert Ivol is scary. Like if the mafia was sending someone to collect money from you, do you want to see Alexander Emelianenko or Gilbert Ivil, or would you like them to send Stipe? I want them to send Stipe,
Sure.
even though he could beat those guys. So that's like the premise, right? And so Stipe sends back like a tweet that like has like a guy doing like a thinking motion, and like it could be all over at that moment. That could be the end of it. But because he's like a famous person, he tweeted at me. He quote tweeted it so everybody could see my tweet. And so also when people respond to it, I get the notifications. So of course, everyone is like, when a UFC fighter tweets something, like all his followers are like that little dog that follows around the big dog. They're like, yeah, Stipe, tell him, Stipe, show him who's boss, Stipe, slap him in the face, Stipe. And then it gets like dark, and like some of them are like, this guy's a cuck, Stipe. You should beat the shit out of this guy, Stipe. And Stipe starts liking these tweets. I can see that you're liking them, and you're like, he's liking stuff that says like, you're a cuck or whatever. And that's like, man, this guy's taking this too far. So me being me, I want to respond to this. Like you've seen me. Like I'm not likely to be a person who's gonna let that go.
Are you a cuck? I'm just clarifying.
Well, so that's like, do people even know what that means? So like,
I mean, I do because I'm a freak, but yes.
Right. But like, that's insulting to me also, but also to like, if you're going to take it literally, that's insulting my wife. And, like it's just like, that's not a cool thing to say. And for a guy that I've always been friendly with on Twitter, like to be like liking that, like, that doesn't make me happy. Right. And so, now we're talking, right? So I say like, how scary can you be, Stipe? You're a guy who wears a polo shirt to work every day. Like, that's not scary. And he's mad now. And he literally, like the heavyweight champion of the world, spent an hour sending me dozens of tweets, just like arguing back and forth. And he's like, if you're not careful, no one's going to be watching what you're tweeting anymore. And I was like, oh, no one watching, that's like your pay-per-views. And so like I got my zinger in, and meanwhile we're making fools of ourselves, like fools. And this happens to me all the time. Like I gotta ask, like, how do you go through your life and this never happens to you?
Me?
Yeah, like anybody else. Like I see like other people like navigate their lives in like a normal fashion, and yet like I find this happening to me all the time, and I don't feel like I'm instigating it. Maybe I was at some point, but like maybe now it's like, I'm that guy who like argues with people on Twitter. So like if someone wants to argue, they come looking for me. And I'm like the big guy in the bar, maybe. Like everybody wants to fight the big guy to show that they're tough. So like if you want to argue on Twitter, it's like, oh, find Jonathan Snowden, he'll argue with you.
I think it's a couple things. One, I don't care. Mostly because of the chair that I am sitting in and how expensive it is. Also, you do a lot of quote tweeting. You know what I mean? So then everyone sees it as opposed to like arguing in private. And thirdly, you have a very unique sense of humor that I do understand and I do get, and no one else gets it, pretty much. So like I know like what you're saying, and also you say a lot of things that are like very honest, and people don't like truth. Because like, so what happens is like people say these things like, they oh, that guy always, that guy fucking loses every time. It's like, actually, no, he's 23-2. So he's actually only lost twice. So I don't know what you're talking about. And that gets people mad because everyone wants to be right, even when they're wrong. And even when the facts are right there. You know what I mean? So that's the problem. Also, Stipe, they did like 450,000 buys for UFC 203. So it wasn't too bad.
Well, how about that? Good for you, Stipe.
I mean, to be fair,
it was still a good joke.
To be fair, CM Punk was on the card, and that probably absolutely helped. As much as you may not like him, he definitely brought in some pay-per-view buys. So now here's
a question. That back then.
Here's a question,
because those are all CM Punk's buys. I think 25,000 of them were Stipe's.
Here's the thing, though. Do you remember what the UFC 203 poster looked like?
I don't,
No.
but
You know
apparently
what?
this is like a big thing.
No one knows what the UFC 203 poster likes because no one cares. So here's what everyone is upset, or there was a little tiff, internet tiff, about the poster and that just got released where Cormier is little and Rumble is large behind him, feeling it was disrespectful. What's the deal? Also, they were upset that there's no imagination going on with these posters. No one cares about these posters. Period. That's it.
Well,
No, I'm not kidding. No one cares. The job of the poster, as much as it's going to break people's hearts, is to put information out, right? Now,
yes.
so Pride had these really cool posters, right? Dream had these really cool posters. Did you watch Dream last week by any chance? Was there a Pride on last week by any chance?
Right. So like, the poster is like a very functional piece of art. It's supposed to like show you who's fighting, kind of if you can like give an idea of what that story is, if you can express that and say when it is and how you can get tickets or watch it. Like that's the deal. And you kind of want like for as much as people online want to see like all this creativity, um, at some point I think that's ineffective. Like you want these there's a way that a fight poster looks that you the kind of like the viewer is going to expect and recognize like, hey, that's a fight poster. Let me look at it more closely and see when this fight is and who these guys are.
Yeah.
And that's the point of it, right?
Do you remember back in the day where like they would have like the small King of the Cage card, or they would have like a Muay Thai fight in a local gym, and there'd be 24 photos of people on the card on the poster? Because that's what you're supposed to do. So I'm going to start working with a company called Victory Fighting. They're based out of Nebraska. You can see them on Fight Pass. And I've talked to their graphics guy, and what we're going to do is we're going to make alternate posters because I'm stupid and I like to have fun. But we're still going to make the real poster because you need to know who's there. They also need to put them up in bars and in gyms so that people know how to watch. And also, let me keep going. If I'm Cormier, okay, UFC is pro wrestling. That's all it is. Life is pro wrestling. It's a story. That's all it is. We've been telling stories since before we could write things down, right? We've been drawing on walls, telling stories. That's what pro wrestling is. The idea
I'm
is
with you.
the idea is Cormier as the champion. You want to be portrayed as a champion who is now facing another insurmountable foe. So Rumble should look bigger. He should look unbeatable. It should look like the champ is now facing someone that he should be terrified of. But then the story goes, and we don't know what's going to happen, but the story is supposed to go, then the champ overcomes these odds and wins, correct?
Right, so he's the champion. He's pictured on this poster with his championship belt, so you're able to identify that he's the man. But yet the story, the subtle story that this poster is telling is that like the threat of Anthony Johnson looms over Daniel Cormier. Like it's enveloping him, his whole world. And this is probably true right now. Like his whole world is wrapped up in how can I defend what I have against this guy who is among the toughest human beings on the planet. And that's a powerful story. And I do think that this poster that people are crapping all over is articulating that story. And so I think it's like it's effective in a subtle way. And not only that, like, if you've been around for a little while and you've seen these posters, like this is a common motif for the UFC. Like this is not a particularly bad poster. It's not awful and worse than what they used to do. Like this is normal. Like there's a poster that looks very much like that, with a very small Georges St. Pierre holding his championship belt, while a giant Nick Diaz head takes up the bulk of the poster. So like this is like a common storytelling device that UFC uses, and it's
It,
my opinion that it's not a bad poster.
no, it looks like a comic book cover. It looks like Spider-Man is now facing Doc Ock, and Doc Ock is his greatest foe, and he has to be worried. Like, this is perfect. And let's be honest, this is not the UFC anymore. This is WME, okay? And what's going to happen is they have someone in office going, should we pay someone to spend an extra hour or two to make this poster, considering we have an event the week before and we have an event the week after? Or should we just put out the fucking information and these people are going to buy it anyway? Because if you think some amazing poster is going to cause someone to go, well, I don't know what it is, but there's this guy and he's on a bear and he's flying through the air. I got to buy it. $60. I'm going to buy it.
No, I don't know who these guys are, but the poster's great, so why shouldn't I buy this on pay-per-view? Like, what did any of the Conor McGregor posters look like? I don't have any idea, but a bunch of people bought those fights, so I think it was okay.
If anything, they should put Conor McGregor on this poster.
They should. I actually like the idea of like a Daniel Cormier, Anthony Johnson kind of like looming over him, and then like up in the very like right-hand corner, just like a little version of John Jones looking down at both of them, as if to say like, whatever you two jokers are doing, like, I'm the real man. Like, that would be a good poster. I'd be into that one.
I feel like the next card that Conor headlines, what it should be is that we find out that this poster with Cormier and Rumble is actually, as we pull back even farther, just his new tattoo on his thigh or something.
It's just like a tattoo, like in the tiger's mouth on his chest.
Right. So basically, this poster was leading into the Conor fight, and it's the most genius marketing we've ever seen.
I wouldn't put it past them. So just wait. Before you judge, you have to wait and see whether that comes to pass. Considering that this is a podcast, video cast, YouTube cast that has not existed before and may never exist again, we got a surprising number of mailbag/Twitter questions, all of which I forgot to print out and bring. And so, but there's one I remember and I want to run it by you.
Okay.
I believe it came from a gentleman named Michael Shane, and he asked what may be the toughest question that I've ever encountered, like that I've ever been faced with in all my years on the planet. And his question was, who made the bigger impact on wrestling, Misawa or Jushin Thunder Liger? And I don't know what to say, because Jushin Thunder Liger has a amazing, hilarious theme song. He wears a goofy costume, and he's also among the greatest professional wrestlers of all time. But meanwhile, Misawa literally gave his life in the ring for the business, for the sport of professional wrestling. So I don't know how to answer this question. Are you familiar with these gentlemen, Misawa and Jushin Thunder Liger?
I may be the only person on this podcast that actually owns a Misawa t-shirt.
Is this true?
I have one, and I wear it all the time. Let me explain to you. Mitsuharu Misawa is my favorite wrestler of all time. Bar none. Not even close. And the fact that he died in the ring, it's what I like. I know I'm not a wrestler, but I almost want to die in the ring. You know?
He what I loved about him is not only like his great technical craftsmanship and ability to tell a story and to execute moves in the ring, like in a way that blow your mind if all you've ever seen is American wrestling. He was able to do it without ever once in 25 years changing his facial expression, which is kind of like an incredible feat all in itself.
What's an incredible feat is that this pale man in green pants could somehow captivate you in a way. And obviously that goes to, who he's fought, and you have to give what he and Kawada did, the reason why we're talking about it. So in my opinion, Misawa's more important than Liger, only for the fact that Liger has ended up in NXT or wherever he's ended up, and he's almost become like this weird, like, cartoon character of himself, when in reality, and I can't believe this is what we're talking about on an MMA show, and I apologize, but there was a match between Liger and Muta where Liger lost his mask. Did you remember that? Have you seen
I
that
do,
one?
and there's a lot of bloodshed.
A lot of bloodshed, and like he's painted his face with stripes, and Liger becomes like almost like this demon-like character. And there's a whole story there, and I think Muda is up there as one of the best too. And he's completely, even though he is regarded in such high regard, I still think he's underrated because few people have had the tenacity in that ring to make it look like he's really trying to stomp through your fucking head, you know? And that's what Muda wanted to do. And the same goes for some Canadian wrestler who I cannot mention by name due to some things that he has done, who also
And the
had that
fact that
tenacity.
we are against murder.
We're anti-murder. So long story short, I had no problem with the Wonder Boy Tyron main event.
I just wanted to bring up that pro wrestling question as our mailbag to let the listeners know right out of the gate that we don't give a fuck what you want to listen to. We want to talk about Japanese pro wrestling from the 90s, and if we want to talk about Japanese pro wrestling from the 90s, that's what we're going to do.
Damn it, we will.
We will.
I think this was a good start. I'm happy with this.
It was certainly something.
I probably should have hit record.
Ah!
We'll see how that goes. And like we said, there's really no rhyme or reason to this. You can feel free to tweet us questions on the YouTube channel. If you know of a way for me to upload this so it can be downloaded somewhere free, we'll do that too. If you want to have it downloaded, I don't know. And otherwise, I think we'll see them next time. We can promise there won't be any ads. Because
Whenever that is, we have no sponsors, we have no plan, we have no real ability to produce a podcast, and yet here we are. And if you enjoyed it, and if we ever have feelings brought to the surface again about the mixed martial arts, we will surely record again and share with the world. That's kind of our gimmick. Maybe it'll be tomorrow. Maybe it'll be in 3 weeks. Maybe it will be in the year 2019. You'll just have to find out.
That's the beauty of the internet. Twitter at Ryan Loco, at J.E. Snowden. You can also follow our ECW podcast, where we go along with ECW television week by week. That is on Patreon. And the beautiful thing about that is you make a small donation to hear the show, and we don't get any of the money. We instead give it all to the pro wrestlers that were in ECW, whoever may need it. So basically, you're doing your part to help others. So patreon.com, look for the Two-Way Dance Pod. It's linked on our Twitters, so you can find that fairly easily. And basically, just click everything we do.